My guest today is Pooja Etwah. Pooja, welcome to Conversations Live.
Thank you, Kabir.
Pooja, so you are the regional coordinator at the UNGC, the United Nations Global Compact Indian Ocean Network. You work very closely with business leaders, policymakers, and communities to drive sustainability, inclusion, and just good business practice across the region. And I'm very excited to have you and looking forward for our chat today.
It's a pleasure, Kabir, to be your guest today. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having me.
Thanks. Excellent. So let's dive in. When we talk about sustainability and inclusion here in Mauritius, it often sounds distant, technical, niche. What does it really mean for the way we work, live, and grow as a society?
To start with, the word sustainability has become a trend today. For the past, let's say, 20 years, it's where we've started first hearing about sustainability, but it's been something that has been there for so many years, but without using the word actually. So if we go really by the definition, it would mean that we are going to really preserve all the resources, everything that we have, so that the future generations, when they come, they would be benefiting from all the resources that we had. But then if you really go into deeper the meaning of the word itself, it is really about how we do things actually.
And I think it relates a little bit to your 10 principles at the UNGC.
Definitely. So the UN Global Compact is an initiative of the United Nations. This year, we are going to celebrate our 25th anniversary since the
We didn't know this,
initiative.
so it's fantastic to have you
Yeah.
just when you're celebrating 25 years of existence.
Yes, and I think for the last 25 years, the UN Global Compact has played a pivotal role actually to accompany businesses in really putting in place what we call principles, because sustainability won't be there if there's no principle, there's no structure in place. So the UN Global Compact 10 principles are actually derived from conventions that have been signed by various agencies of the UN, like the UNEP, the UN Environmental Programme, ILO, the International Labour Organization. So the 10 principles today are on areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. So when you really see the areas, it's just not only about social issues, but also environmental, and we are talking about governance. So this brings a bit about the new concept that today corporate businesses are talking,
Which is
ESG.
ESG. To bring this conversation home, Mauritius has had a 2030 vision. We can see how large corporations in Mauritius are, and even SMEs, are very conscious of that and are working very hard to have their sustainability agenda aligned to that 2030 vision. But what we tend to forget is we're only 5 years away from 2030. How far away are we from our targets? Are we on track?
So if we talk globally, let's say the report 2024 showed that only 17% are on track. 17% of the SDGs. 17% are regressing, and some are stagnant. In the case of Mauritius, I would say we are not doing so bad. We are progressing on some areas. It's going smoothly, but on other areas, we still have work to do. And it's mostly the private sector which plays a pivotal role there, because the private sector is the one who drives the economy, and they are the one that have at times resources and even means to make things happen. And the government, I would say the public sector, is there to provide the right structure in terms of legal frameworks, in terms of policies, and as well as being the facilitator to make things happen. So on the track aspect, I would say that we are moving slowly but surely.
And you said companies, there are things that they're doing well, things that they're not, they could be doing better. Can you paint a picture for us to understand, relating to certain benchmarking, whether it's SDGs or your 10 principles?
So today, the private sector, namely the largest corporates in Mauritius, everyone basically from their sector or activity, they are doing things on which they have direct impact. This is where they do their materiality assessment to identify those key areas. Let's say, for example, on the climate aspect, because Mauritius is vulnerable to climate changes, we are every day facing the climatic changes, whether it's about trends in rainfall, temperature rises, sea level rise, erosion along the coast. So there are various sectors which are directly doing things to really adapt to these climate changes. So there is a need there because of the environmental aspect. And on the other aspect, there are some companies, for example, they are doing more on the social side. But when bringing everyone together, it's where some are like doing things very fast in terms of environmental issues, others on the social aspect. But there's very little or very few companies which are moving like really in the global aspect of it, moving environmentally, socially, and even the top management is fully engaged and committed.
And this is interesting. Then, are we seeing enough collaboration between large corporates? If some are doing better in certain aspects than the others, and vice versa, are you seeing shared knowledge and insights so that there's this shared vision to ESG and make it a shared priority?
I think everyone today is very conscious that unless we have collaboration, that we will be able to create impacts. And this has recently been witnessed through the Responsible Business Summit that was held in Mauritius with the top companies in Mauritius. So they came together actually to create more awareness, bringing experts from the international platform to share this knowledge and really boosting about this change. And I think things are improving because we can see that collaboration exists. Various companies recently about ocean preservation, they are working together. So I think this part, the collaborative part, is very important. And this is where the UN Global Compact actually plays an important role.
So we have a new government in place. Are you seeing any early signs of renewed policy direction or push in the right areas?
It is very interesting to note that since we have this new government, various platforms have been involved in discussions, namely whether it's about the environmental issues or some about gender equality, for example. And I have personally witnessed that ministers were present and they shared about their vision. And we do have some ministers coming from the private sector. So the
It's quite a few.
approach, yeah, quite a few. And it's very interesting to note that they are very, very well aware and the commitment is there.
What about private and public partnership? Are we seeing the right kind of collaboration for a unity of, the right kind of unity of purpose to be able to meet our national sustainability deadlines?
Very often we hear from the private sector that they have not the support, for example, from the public sector. If they are doing things, whether it's about, let's take, for example, waste management, they might be doing things in their factories, on their premises, but then when you go on the national level, they find that they are not being supported there. But I think right now, for example, the Ministry of Environment is very aware and they are taking things very seriously with the climate action bills coming, acts coming. There are also legislations about sustainable finance. So I think the mechanism is being implemented. We are going to have frameworks.
And which I go back to the question of, we're 5 years away. Are we on track?
If I'm being realistic, I would say we are not going to hit 100% of the SDGs, but it's mostly about having maximum effort to reach there. If we are not going to hit 100%, at least we are above 90%. And this is where the urgency to act is it is an urgent call for action for everyone, whether it's about the private sector or the public sector or the civil society. So everyone has a role to play. And until we really put actions to words, that we are going to really see things happen. Because commitments are there, but are we doing the right actions? Are actions being implemented? Are we measuring the impacts of our actions? And today we are talking about reporting in the sustainability world. No one is spared from reporting, whether it is about for some is mandatory because they are interacting on the international platform. For others, it's voluntary because it's about their stakeholders and it's about being transparent.
As an island nation, we are obviously extremely at risk when it comes to climate change. Are we still reacting to symptoms, or are we finally leading?
I would say that in the first instance, when we did first, like we became aware of the climate risk, we were addressing symptoms, but things changed. I think because of the knowledge sharing exchanges that we've had on the regional level with the African continent or on international level. So today we are going to really integrate this risk aspect, whether it's in strategies, in operations, or in the way that we are planning our future. So I think that it is very important to have the assessment of climate risk today. Even investors, when they are talking about investing in companies, they are going to assess or even consider the ESG risk rating. So it plays an important role. And on the climate aspect, like we're saying, it's not about addressing the symptoms. It's being mostly proactive, anticipating what can happen. And being reactive would be like we are just, for right now, nature is going to save itself after all. It's just that we people need to do things that we're going to save ourselves.
I like that. Yes, that's very true. Do you think there are any sectors that should be leading the climate change agenda? And is that already happening?
If we really need to think if it's about one sector, I don't think it's the case, because everyone in a way, directly or indirectly, has a role to play. Whether it's about those manufacturing products, they are using resources, or whether it's about the consumers. So everyone has a role to play over there. When we're talking about climate, energy comes into mind. Renewable energy is something that on which we can really focus on, because we are talking about science-based targets, 1.5 degrees Celsius target. So everything over there comes to the aspect of using the resources, our natural resources, because from the extraction to the production of the product, using the product, and finally, whether it's about disposing, recycling, or reusing. So at every bit of it, there is the aspect of climate comes in.
Temperature rising, rising trend. We are an island state. We have an urgency.
People are actually feeling today, for example, in Mauritius, we've seen that the summer period is longer.
Yes.
Because it's about the atmospheric temperature, but it's not really directly climate change. Climate change is about trend that's happening on the surface of the earth. So this is a bit different from the meteorological aspect, but I think that it helps people actually to understand. I would say common people, they would understand that today, for example, years ago, people never heard of flash floods. Today, we know what is flash floods. Some kids won't know what is cyclones, but people can relate to what happened. So I think on that aspect is where we need to really make people conscious actually about how they contribute. It's something natural, yes, but the human interaction, the human actions are accelerating things.
We can obviously see, for instance, from a finance perspective, banks, institutions are tackling climate change from an investment perspective in order to look at the top of the pyramid. Today, we're talking about adaptation finance. We're talking about having loans that are sustainable, investments that are sustainable. Things are getting rated from an ESG perspective. What is the traction there from a UNGC perspective in terms of how corporations are adapting their internal practices, processes in order to be able to be eligible for those finance? And how do you think that is going to create real change to what you've just said in people's practical lives?
Yeah, I think banks today, how and why they are mostly investing into considering ESG, having green loans, it's because of the principles of responsible investment. So when we're talking about investment, because at the end of the day, it's about investing the money so that you have a better return ahead. People at times would believe that the risk needs to be lower for them to have a better return. But when they are going to include the ESG aspect, because you're going to include climatic risk, environmental risk, you're going to have social risk integrated. So you're going to be proactive into really mitigating those risks and having better returns. Today, banks are being supported by international institutions or assistance from foreign countries like France, for example. We have AFD, Agence Française de Développement, which is being very supportive for the past years, namely in terms of financing renewable energy technologies, opening up the markets. So these kind of investment actually are helping banks as well to have experts to analyze projects, support businesses to implement these projects, and also providing the technical assistance. Because at times we are, like I said, we are a very small island. So in terms of technical knowledge, we might not be there, but many countries, especially European countries, they are more advanced in terms of technology, in terms of technical knowledge. So they have also availability of financial investments, so they are able to support namely the African continent. And if we position Mauritius in the African continent, so Mauritius is among those that is doing well. We are not the only one, but if we're going to be position Mauritius, we are doing very well because we have taken the advantage sometimes back and being our strategic position as well in terms of our structure, in terms of our political stability. So we have attracted those institutions to actually support us to lead the way for Africa.
One of the issues that we keep hearing is finance gap.
Yeah.
And as a small island development state, it's a big issue. We've got the climate related risk. We need funds to be able to assess and mitigate those risks. And then at the same time, looking ahead in terms of project financing, loan financing, industry financing, funds are required. What is your perspective? What is the perspective there? And what can you tell us about that finance gap and the effect it has on increasing the issue?
I think on the financial gap is there, surely, because many companies or even the private sector or public sector do have interesting projects. But when it comes to really funding those projects, it's where the gap is coming. At times, it can be due to really structural challenges that is being encountered. For example, they might be having not the appropriate permits at times. It can be that. It can also be in terms of the technical assistance and experts, because we don't really have all these experts. And at times to really find the right person or right company or assistance, it becomes difficult. And the funding needs to be there, surely, because being small islands, we do have the opportunity to make things. The funding as compared to a larger country is way less than that. So I believe that having for example, the institutions such as the Green Climate Fund, for example, availability of those funds is very important. And how do we go about benefiting from those funds is very important. At times, people don't really know about this availability of funds and how or what is the process behind, how do we apply for that. So it is where being aware of those process is very important. We have this gap of access to those finances because people are not aware that these finances exist. And today, I think this is where the discussions on international platforms is very important. So we need to really go on those international platforms where we are able to position our projects and really know how these projects can really be implemented and how can we access those funds. Is it about just administrative processes? Is it about technical support? Or is it just that it's also about seeing which countries are more in need and what are the issues for each country and how this is going to contribute globally. So it becomes, at that point, it becomes important for the funding to be allocated to the right project for the right impacts and to contribute globally towards common goals.
And are you seeing the right amount of finance coming in for the amount of work that is required within the countries that you look at?
It's not about having the adequate amount of funding, but at times it's about initiating the project so that at least the seed funding is there, and assessing the project itself, about the feasibility of the project, about the impacts that it's going to create for people, for the environment, for the community in general. Funding is not only the financial monetary aspect. It's also about the various levels of funding. It's also about missing policies because we don't really have enough policies or enforcement of those policies. At times they are there. We do have them in regulatory frameworks, but how about the enforcement? Policies about resource management, for example. So how, if the structure is not there, so how can the funding be made? So we need to really have at least a start of structure because we are accountable at the end of the day. For example, we are going to seek funding, we are going to receive the funds, we are going to do something, but we need to be accountable of how those funds have been used. And this is where a structure is very important. Policies are important. So if
Clear vision is important.
exactly. So if these basic elements are missing, so we are not going to have those funding.
Let's talk gender. Mauritius has an increasing population of women. Girls are doing very well academically. Why aren't we seeing the same picture at the workplace when we talk about women in leadership positions, in senior positions, at board levels? Why is there that disparity?
This is quite a topic, I think, which is very interesting to note because the figures are there and things don't really reflect in reality. I would also take the example of the UN Global Compact data that we have. Actually, our network today has 62 participating companies. Of these 62, more than 90% have commitments on target gender equality. But when we are going to say what are the actions that are being implemented, very few, I would say around 50%. So there is a gap between the commitment and the action. Why is there that whether we have a larger population, female population, girls doing better in academic studies, but why is there a gap? What are the structural barriers? So we need to really focus on those structural barriers. But things are improving. I would say we do have a few CEO ladies today. But are we providing the right infrastructure, the right, I would say, policies in place with actions, concrete actions?
Are we doing enough to break the systemic barriers? Or do you think we're just relying on the surface level initiatives?
Women being considered mostly as more related to caring of the family. So the quality, the work-life balance, quality life aspect plays a major role over there. And it's where today we see that many companies are doing efforts about work from home arrangements, flexible working arrangements. So at times, not all industries can cater for that. And it's also about providing the right opportunities for those women that have the abilities, they have the technical capacities to do things, but they are not being empowered. How many today leadership courses or programs have women being participating in those programs? Very few. And this is where I think in terms of providing the opportunity is missing. Why are we not providing these opportunities? Is it because we think that everywhere we find that it's about meritocracy, it's about competences. But if everyone is given the opportunity, we can then evaluate the level of competency. So I think on that aspect, working on the empowering of women is very important. And it's also having men allies, because you need to have really also men pushing ladies, because we live in a world that has been structured in a way that it's adapted to men. It's been there. So we need to really adapt that environment. It's where we also need to have the men also empowering these ladies, providing these opportunities.
Isn't that then the whole point of having sustainability reporting and then having ESG ranking, and therefore then getting your companies ranked, and therefore having a direct link between sustainability reporting, ranking, and concrete actions?
I think reporting plays a major role. So this is where it can really help to make things happen. And reporting today is becoming a burden on most companies, because once you measure, you're able to control that indicator. And when you're able to control that indicator, you're also able to set targets, which needs to be smart, realistic. So this is where frameworks, reporting frameworks, actually provide a structure of reporting.
Talking about frameworks, what is the framework that we're using today?
We have so many frameworks, and this is where I think that companies at times feel confused which framework they would use. The UN Global Compact, for example, have a communication and progress report where annually all the companies have to report on their progress. And this report is aligned with some international standards like the GRI or the international other non-financial reporting aspects. So it provides that framework. But today, for many companies, it's also if we see Mauritius, it's about really voluntary reporting. Unless those that are listed, for example, they want on SAMC, they want to really have this reporting because they need to have it. It is mandatory over there. Once reporting becomes mandatory, they would need to have the mechanism to really measure, set their targets, have actions, measure the progress, measure what is being done. And then they would be able to know what I need to do to achieve those targets.
From a UNGC perspective, how do you, what is your role so far as those reporting are concerned? And is there a way, are these being audited?
We don't audit. To answer your question, we don't audit. The UN Global Compact is a voluntary initiative. So the company decides to adhere to the principles of the UN Global Compact, firstly. But then the role as well of the UN Global Compact is really to support businesses to implement actions which have impacts. How do we measure those impacts is through the communication on progress report. All the companies, once they submit their communication on progress report, they have a data visualization tool where they are able to benchmark themselves within companies of the same sector, different geographies. They are able to do that. Once they can do the benchmarking, it helps them to know what is the trends, where they need to put more efforts, and what are their weak points as well in terms of the industry. In our context, the UN Global Compact is also able to use that data actually to develop and to analyze data and to drive meaningful information that can help us actually to support businesses. How? Is through the data that is being available. We are able to identify where companies need support, whether it is about training, it is about capacity building, is it about expert guidance. So, or even at times, do we need to have more stakeholder engagement over there, policy advocacy campaigns. So this helps actually to have this information.
But that data that you talk about, that data could be flawed. Who's auditing that data? And with 5 years to go to 2030, it seems to me that everything is still very theoretical. Everyone is measuring in their own way. There's no clear understanding of what framework we should be following. And there is some reporting being done and some not being done. What is the actual state of affairs?
We don't audit, yes. The data at times are questionable. And this is where I think the transparency becomes important, because through your actions, this also reflects about the impacts. So in a way, you can't say that you are progressing, but then we are going to see the negative actions.
Exactly.
So it's really correlated over there. The banking sector, they would follow a specific framework, reporting framework, which is adapted for them. Others in other sector, for example, those in the manufacturing sector, they would use other frameworks. But then everyone is relying on a framework. There's no like one universal framework because all sectors are different. But we do have some non-financial reporting like the IFRS standard about the non-financial reporting. So this is a way to really align all the industries to report. Obviously, some will report on some material issues, others won't because it's not material for them. So having like a universal way of reporting is quite complex. Even in Europe, they are still struggling to find the right reporting framework to really adapt to the European companies. So at least whether you are referring to framework 1, framework 2, at least you are relying on a structure that has been tested, and then you're applying and you're reporting.
But then should we be waiting for a framework to be imposed on us in Mauritius, or should there be policy making and having a national framework? We've been talking about having an ESG framework for a number of years. Is that happening?
It's not about waiting, having this global or standardized framework. Everyone needs to do their part. The frameworks come in when at least we are prepared for it, it would be easier. If we're going to just wait for the ESG framework, for example, to be implemented in Mauritius, it's going to take time because the policymakers do take time, at least very often, to at least make things happen. Because
this is a conversation that's been happening for the last 5 years.
It has been. And at times it's a bit difficult to understand why it becomes difficult. But I think it's basically for some of the issues.
Let's put it this way. What should we be doing to move towards a more structured and formalized way of assessing the reporting?
I think we need to take example from some European countries over there. For example, Denmark, which has a very solid framework in place, because it's about companies which are mature enough today, because they have been prepared. It's also being that aspect of being prepared for it. If you're not prepared, it's going to be very, very tedious work, and it's going to be like they would be discouraged to do that. But the framework needs to come from from the public sector, because they are those that would provide the framework, actually making it mandatory. Very often, until it is mandatory, it's going
it doesn't
to
get taken seriously.
Yes. But taking things voluntary also demonstrates one's engagement and commitment to making things right. So there is a balance over there to really make everyone aligned we need to have this mandatory framework in place. It would help actually to boost things and make things easier for everyone.
What about the region, the African continent? Can you paint a picture so far sustainability is concerned across the continent versus how we're doing in Mauritius?
So if we look really at the continent, I would say that now most of the companies in Africa, namely Egypt, we have the Republic of Congo, even Cote d'Ivoire. So everyone, they are doing really an amazing work actually to integrate sustainability, the SDGs, really in the core operation and business strategies. And this is something that is being like a very good opportunity for the African continent, because Africa has the youngest population in the
Oh, that's
world.
clear. They are the
So,
future of.
exactly. So we can see that businesses today are more interested into having and being prepared for sustainability issues, having these sustainable development strategies in place so that they are able also to attract investors, attract more investment within their countries. And there's also a strong collaboration happening between the private and the public sector over there. Mauritius surely is leading the way, but we need also to take example from some countries where there's collaborative work between the private and the public sector. The willingness, the strong willingness is there. I would take the example of Angola. I have a colleague over there who has been doing amazing work with having more companies engage into SDGs, into implementing the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. And surely these companies are seeing positive impacts within their way of doing things. So this is where Africa has a very good opportunity to embed and also to progress. And Mauritius has a very good opportunity to lead the way over there.
I want to come to that. How can we lead the way? Firstly, are we doing better, or should we learn from countries within the continent? And then, secondly, how can we lead or collaborate? Let's use the word collaborate with the continent to be a force for good.
I would say Mauritius is doing well. Is doing well compared to many countries. Even when we're going to see about the SDG index ranking, Mauritius is better as compared to many countries of Africa. But it does not mean that we can't learn from other countries, because those countries which are today now implementing things, they are doing things differently from how we did before. So there's that aspect. And I think what's important is to learn from many countries is the close collaboration between the public and private sector. I think that is very, very important. And within the private sector as well, not to see each other as competitors, but seeing each other as collaborators. Mauritius, why we have this ability, because possibly our literacy level is way better. In Africa, we have 100, almost 100%, if not 100% literacy rate. So over there, we are like people are more knowledgeable, if I can term it this way. People have access to technology. Digital literacy is something that is coming in place. Mauritius is better on that side as well. So we are able to really help those African countries by knowledge sharing. It is about helping each other, collaborating each other, and we also have some very many companies in Mauritius, for example, they have other joint ventures, or they have
They
other
do.
subsidiaries in Africa. So they are able to bring that knowledge over there and also making things happen.
Looking ahead to 2030, past 2030 to maybe 2035, what would be an ideal Mauritius to you from a sustainability point of view?
I think an ideal Mauritius would be like we have a diversity of cultures in Mauritius. I think we need to reflect that diversity in terms of collaborations that exist within the public and private sector partnership area, and also within the private sector, within the various industries. I think we really need to see the diversity of how everyone is collaborating, and we can be a very good example. Being a small island, I think we have all the means to do that, and possibly being really the pioneer of how a country leading the way should really be. So I think if I'm being hopeful, I would say that collaboration is going to happen, but I want to see stronger collaboration and partnerships being established.
So, Pooja, what we're going to now do is to end. We're going to do our rapid fire session. So, I want you to give me your honest, brutal, short, quick answer. So, to start with, one sustainability buzzword you would wish people understood better.
Circular economy.
An inspiring project or business you think people should know more about.
I think an interesting project is a ripe factory that has won many entrepreneurial awards. People don't really know about it, but it's a very interesting project about biomaterial being produced in Mauritius.
A policy change that could instantly increase the adoption rate of ESG.
I would say policy on resource management, because we are a country which depends a lot on resources coming from various countries, or even our natural resources, whether it is human resources. So we really need to have a strong policy over there.
And your one word hope for the future of Mauritius and the region?
I would say become a resilient island.
Wow. Okay. Pooja, thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure to have you on Conversations Live to talk about sustainability. And I wish you all the very best with what you've got going at the UNGC.
Thank you, Kabir. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.